How did she get this in the beginning, and how does she keep acquiring it?
You could walk into any convenience store and purchase your own thing without them checking your ID.
Their long-term health impacts unknown. Concerned parents want to know how their kids are getting hold of vaping products. Along with the butterflies that come with the first day back in class, some parents are feeling stressed about their kids and vaping. They're speaking out to CBC News, frustrated that children are able to buy the products even though they're not legally old enough. Shannon Martin joins us live now from Queen and John. And Shannon, vapes seem to be everywhere these days.
Yeah, especially the advertising, and there is a reason for that. Ontario is actually the only province that has specifically passed legislation to legalize the promotion of all vaping products in all retail locations. 7 other provinces have banned it altogether, but that's why everyone, including our kids, are being bombarded by ads like this. It's the first day back to books and friends, and for some, bad habits like vaping.
It's not allowed in school, so people still do it. Like, people still bring it into school and do it
inside, mostly bathrooms.
How are they able to get away with that?
I mean, the teachers don't go in the bathrooms, that's why.
Easy to hide, and more are getting hooked. Vaping now surpasses cigarette smoking among teens. A recent Health Canada survey shows 23% of students in grades 7 to 12 have tried an e-cigarette.
It was a call from their school in middle school. The principal had contacted us because some kids, some girls specifically, had acquired vape kits. Some were getting kits from older siblings, but there was a guy illegally selling them on the school property, and the school got the police involved on that.
Jay Neville thought that'd be the end of it, but since then she's pulled 6 vape kits off her now 15-year-old daughter.
She said she's stopped vaping, but to me, that's one problem. The other problem is, how did she get this in the beginning, and how does she keep acquiring it?
Her daughter and other teens told CBC Toronto they're buying vapes on their own from neighborhood convenience stores and vape shops. No ID, no problem.
You could walk into any convenience store and purchase your own thing without them checking your ID.
Retailers caught selling vapor products to minors can face fines. Public health units inspect stores and investigate any complaints. Since 2018, Toronto Public Health has handed down 13 convictions, the region of Peel, 2, and Durham, just 1.
There has to be much more regulation.
This top Toronto cardiologist says the original claim that vaping can help smokers quit cigarettes is unproven. Almost all vaping products have nicotine, and that's dangerous, especially to teens.
Until we know they are entirely safe, which doesn't seem to be the case from what we know so far, there has to be advisory notices on the vaping products.
And Dwight, what we know about nicotine is that it can have a serious impact on young people. So we're talking about stunting brain growth, impacts on memory and concentration, but vaping is a relatively new thing. It's only been around for about 10 years. So all that long-term research is really just beginning now.
Yeah, still unknown. So what, Shannon, is Health Canada saying about all of this?
Well, Health Canada says it is moving quickly on proposed new regulations that they announced back in February, but they've been doing months of consultations, and that includes limiting things like advertising that we are seeing everywhere. But when we could see those changes, we don't know. Parents say it can't come soon enough.
Thank you, Shannon. And for the first time this year, the dangers of vaping will be part of the curriculum at TDSB schools.
We need to empower kids that they know the dangers of vaping and what vaping, not only what vaping can lead to, but all the chemicals that are in vaping products. So the more educated they become, therefore the better educated or better decisions that they can make.
As early as grade 3, students will learn about the effects of vaping and smoking. When it comes to using vaping products, students aren't permitted to vape within 20 meters of school grounds. TDSB schools are also changing their no smoking signs to include no vaping. Mississauga could play a key role in the upcoming federal election, and so tonight the National will be there live. I'll talk to Rosemary Barton about why Mississauga will be so important coming up. As Hurricane Dorian finally begins to move away from the Bahamas, a humanitarian crisis is unfolding there tonight. In what can only be described as a worst-case scenario, the storm stalled over the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama for a day and a half, delivering hour after hour of fierce winds and rain and storm surges. It's feared thousands of homes and buildings have been damaged or destroyed. At least 5 deaths have been reported. But with rescue efforts just getting underway, officials are still far from knowing the true extent of the disaster. It's estimated more than 100,000 people in the Bahamas are now in need of food and clean water. Humanitarian agencies are gearing up for that huge relief effort, including some right here. As Ali Shiasan reports, people in the GTA with family in the Bahamas are now desperately trying to get in touch with their loved ones.
Time's ticking, so we need to get there.
Watching the devastation from afar is especially hard for people like Andre DeVoe, the former Toronto Maple Leaf turned firefighter, whose family is in the Bahamas right now. He hasn't heard from his father in over 24 hours.
You know, fingers are crossed. I think he's okay. You know, he lives by himself, so I'm a little worried, but you know, I think everybody's kind of in the same boat there, and you know, even if you're okay, you know, after the hurricane, I think infrastructure is going to be a problem.
So he's volunteering with Global Medic, which is sending planes full of supplies.
What's the #1 problem that a family is going to face post-hurricane? Clean drinking water, right? So what we're getting them is we're getting them these sachets right here. Each one of these sachets, that's going to purify 10 liters of water. 240 sachets in a box. That box goes in this bucket. That means 2,400 liters of clean water. That means your kid's not going to die because they drank dirty water, right? And this is critical stuff. We also know that some of their shelters and some of their hospitals and some of their clinics have sustained significant damage, which means they don't have clean drinking water in those facilities. And what we do is we come in and we set it up with a generator, and we're able to purify 12 liters a minute with a unit like this. So let's say 1,000 people were in that shelter, their clean water needs for the day are covered with a tiny unit like this. And when those folks are going home to try to rebuild, a kit like this makes sure they get clean water at home.
The first plane flies out of Pearson tomorrow at 8 a.m., landing 3.5 hours later in Nassau. DeVoe's brother and cousins who live in the Bahamas are helping coordinate the boats out to the surrounding islands from there, like Abaco, where 5 people have been confirmed dead.
We get lots of folks like Andre who have family that are affected, right? So it's a lot more personal to them.
My countrymen and you know, women and children are suffering right now, and I have to kind of sit back here and watch a little. I'd rather be on the ground, but right now this is where I'm needed. I know it's hard for people to understand the impact of a hurricane, but I've seen the devastation firsthand, and you know, people are in trouble. So please help any way you can.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Dorian is now heading towards the southern U.S. David Common has more now from Florida.
The destruction and flooding in the Bahamas is massive and catastrophic. Entire homes washed away, others submerged. The island got 76 centimeters of rain on top of a 7-meter-high storm surge, which pushed water inland.
I mean, my heart's breaking knowing what's happening to people around the island and Abaco as well. The Humane Society flooded. There's a few hundred dogs in there and other animals, along with some people. Some of the medical clinics are flooding. The airport's underwater. Hearing stories of people can't find their family members. I mean, jet skis are being deployed to try and rescue people. The toughest part is wanting to help people, but really not being able to, because we want to get out there and help folks. But we just can't right now. It's not safe.
This map shows the island before Dorian moved in. Now the dark areas show where water has creeped in.
Basically, just debris everywhere. Downstairs, everything is completely destroyed, wiped out.
Now that the storm has at last begun to move away from the Bahamas, the winds, waves, and rain are shifting to the Florida coastline, though the storm's powerful center will remain out in the ocean.
I feel bad for the people in the Bahamas. They got crushed with a storm like we've never seen before.
In parts of Florida, some small boats sank. More than 3/4 of Florida's beaches are expected to face some erosion. The state, though, is not likely to face catastrophe.
While we think this is a much better track than what we were looking at 72 hours ago, we just ask people to stay safe, remain vigilant.
The danger is not over either, as Dorian picks up forward speed and moves towards Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. David Coleman, CBC News, Jupiter, Florida.
So at the end of David's piece there, they've been tracking that storm, and Colette, you're tracking it too.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get you up to date with what's going on here. I'm starting off with the visible satellite. As the sun goes down, we're going to lose this imagery. But really, it's still a Category 2 storm, and just shows you how broad the scope of this thing just by looking at the cloud deck. Then we go in and have a look at the radar imagery. Now, the strongest winds tend to be off towards that northeast quadrant, but the heaviest rains, look at these bands. These aren't just rain showers, but heavy, deep thunderstorm activity too, rotating against the coastline. We know that devastation in the Bahamas had so much to do with just how strong the storm was, but how slowly it was moving. And this is the problem along the coastline of Florida. It's picked up a little bit of speed, but still, this is a very slow mover. So these very heavy winds, strong winds that they're seeing, the hurricane force ones extending out almost 100 kilometers towards the coastline, and the tropical storm force nearly 300 kilometers into the coast and across Florida. So that gives it, as it's moving so slowly with those winds and that rain just coming at it, it's been a really rainy season for August, but for the year for Florida. And so this just really, because it goes so slowly, allows all those structures to really be weakened. Now, as it's going to be heading along the coastline here, as I said, a Category 2, 175 kilometer an hour winds at this point. We can watch that trajectory as it's going to be coming. It looks like skimming along the coast. Still, that poses all kinds of problems. But as it moves through, getting Thursday night towards Friday, towards the Carolinas, there could still be a direct hit there, certainly towards those outer banks. Eventually, will it have an impact on Canada? For our interests into Atlantic Canada, that risk is there, and potentially still is a Category 1 storm. Now, a system that's going to help to move this along is actually impacting us back here in the GTA. You can see these lightning strikes. This is a cold front that's coming our way. We do have some severe thunderstorm watches off towards our west into the southwest, and we're going to have some active weather coming through tonight. I'll talk more about that coming up, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
We're still just under 2 months away from the federal election, but the battles that will decide which party forms our next government are already shaping up, with one of the key locations being Mississauga. That's where Rosemary Barton is tonight for the National. She joins us now. So, Rosie, tell us why Mississauga will be so important.
Well, it's Mississauga and all the other places around Toronto, right? This belt that, of course, your viewers know so well that we call the 905. And it's because not only are these ridings voter-rich, but they're seat-rich. And that's because there are so many of them here. In fact, in the 905, there are more seats than there are in some provinces in this country. So we know that parties are going to spend a lot of time here. And we know that if you want to form government, you need to win all 6 of the ridings in Mississauga. You need to pick up Brampton, Vaughan, and other places. And so you can expect to see the leaders, once this election actually does get underway, you can expect to see them in and around here a whole bunch.
What do you think then are some of the big issues affecting people living in that region?
You know, my producer and I, we spent a little bit of time here last week talking to people, and it's some of the things that, you know, wouldn't surprise you very much: the economy, jobs, sort of stability. Some people talking about the carbon tax for sure. As you know, lots of people commute from the 905 for work into Toronto. So those are things that they're thinking about. But I would say the thing that struck me the most was that no one's really into it yet. And that's not surprising. The writ hasn't been dropped. People will start to pay more attention as the debates happen and as things start ramping up. There does seem to be, I would say, from the few things that I've done over the course of the couple weeks here, a kind of sense of disillusionment, though, amongst voters. So it'll be interesting to see which leader, which party can capture the imagination of people.
When you hear some of the Liberals talk, it almost sounds like they're running against Doug Ford and now Andrew Scheer. So you've been looking at whether the Ford government will be a factor in this federal election, and is it acute to that region too?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a coincidence. This happened back in the spring. It started that the Prime Minister started testing these lines actually in Mississauga when Doug Ford's popularity numbers were really bottom of the barrel at that point because he was moving forward with a lot of different cuts. Conservatives in Ottawa tell me that there was a hit on their popularity in and around this region, that some candidates and MPs really concerned that they may not win because some people are so angry with Doug Ford. We went out to the Mississauga Board of Trade, their annual party, their annual barbecue, and we talked to a few of those people to see where their heads were at with whether Doug Ford will have an impact on Andrew Scheer. And here's what they told us. At the annual summer gathering of the Mississauga Board of Trade, the talk is usually about how government choices impact business. But with an election in the offing, some of that conservative reluctance is on the table too.
I think he's stirred so many beehives.
Like a lot of Ontarians, I'm not exactly happy with the Ontario situation right now.
Others say while Ford could be a problem, he is doing what he should.
Premier Ford has issues that he believes are important to Ontario, and he is going to be very vocal about those with any federal government. It doesn't matter what party forms the government.
So at this point, Dwight, I should say that the federal Conservatives tell me that they believe that this is that it's bottomed out, that this is as bad as it's going to get. Remember, Doug Ford said earlier this summer that he wasn't going to get involved in the federal election. Queen's Park not reconvening until after that election. But as you also know, Doug Ford can be unpredictable. So federal Conservatives are hoping that he really does keep his nose out of this so that they can get a clean campaign and minimize any impact that he could have.
And we know you'll be watching all of this. Thank you for joining us, Rosie.
Sure will.
Rosemary Barton is hosting the National from Mississauga tonight, highlighting the area and issues that matter to residents there. 10 p.m. on CBC television and streaming, of course, on CBC Gem. British MPs are one step closer to stopping a no-deal Brexit.
Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Opposition lawmakers and Tory rebels have voted to take control of Parliament after a day of heated debate. That decision just came down in the last hour. Talia Ritchie joins us live now with more on this. So, Talia, how did we get there?
Well, Dwight, the opposition forced an emergency debate today after the Prime Minister lost his working majority in Parliament when one of his MPs crossed the floor. That opened up the window for this vote. The PM wants a Brexit deal, but says Britain will leave the EU on October 31st with or without one. His opponents believe a no-deal exit would have dire consequences.
No deal, Mr. Speaker, will mean food shortages, reduced medical supplies and chaos at our ports. Not me saying that. The government's own leaked analysis says, and it warns of chaos all across the board.
This new legislation would force Johnson to go back to ask the EU for another extension to try to keep negotiating a deal for the UK to leave with a trade agreement. But Johnson says having to ask for a delay would destroy any chance of negotiation for a new deal.
One step that would jeopardize all the progress that we have made in the G7 and around the capitals of Europe. And that is if this House were to decide that it was simply impossible for us to leave without a deal, and to make that step illegal, to force us, that's what they want, to undermine our negotiation, to force us, that's what they want, to force us to beg for yet another pointless delay.
The opposition will try to pass that legislation tomorrow. If they succeed, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will push for an election. Dwight?
Thank you, Talia.
We all have stories from different genders and different countries and different people, and I think that's really
A group of teens from across the GTA helped shape TIFF's lineup this year. We'll bring you some of those movies and why this new generation chose them. Coming up. It is, of course, the first day of school, and as parents drop their kids this week, they'll see extra officers looking for speeding motorists.
No tolerance for excuses. There's too much at risk is what it comes down to. So we're going to be really focused on speeding, stop sign enforcement, drivers that don't stop for a working school bus with the stop arm out and whatnot.
Toronto Police Traffic Services is looking to send a strong message to drivers to slow down, especially in school zones. Mayor John Tory was at Oak Ridges Junior Public School near Victoria Park in Danforth this morning. He outlined the city's Vision Zero program, which includes installing speed cameras in 50 locations starting in December after a successful pilot project.
On Renforth Drive in Etobicoke, for example, where the speed limit is 40 kilometers per hour, a driver was clocked by these speed cameras going 202 kilometers per hour. On Rockcliffe Boulevard, also out to the west of Toronto, where the speed limit is 30 kilometers per hour, the cameras found almost 50,000 vehicles a week were speeding on a road where the average volume is 56,000 vehicles. So almost every car was speeding.
The camera technology will issue tickets to the registered owner of vehicles that are caught speeding. The program is also looking to lower speed limits and install more school safety zones around the city. It's good to know that kids will be going back to school with safety in mind, but how do they feel now that the summer is unofficially over?
I miss being able to sleep in all day and only eat junk food.
I miss going on trips with my mom and my dad and my big sister.
I'm going back to school. I'm so happy.
Because I'm grade 1.
You're going to grade 1? What is so exciting about grade 1? What are you excited about?
I can do anything.
Yeah, only 11 more to go, buddy. Spirits ran high as parents brought their kids to school this morning, but many felt sentimental as they left them after a long summer together.
I have mixed feelings. I like them a lot, so I'll miss them.
I'm nervous because she's in the big playground. She's going to be in the big lunchroom.
There's a lot of nervous feelings, excitement. I'm just happy to be back on structure.
She was feeling bored. Because 2 months of long summer vacation, now she is excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This shows another step in life, and I feel so happy.
He's going to the first grade. It's really awesome, and he should do well. All the best, baby.
Encouraging words from Mom. Hope everyone had a great first day. Although it's been a while since I had a first day of school, CBC Toronto wanted to throw it back a little to when some familiar faces had their first days and see if you can recognize them. Take a look.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
The Toronto International Film Festival begins Thursday, and some of the people who programmed this year's movies are actually back in school. A diverse group of teens adding their stamp of approval to films they believe will resonate with their peers. Taylor Simmons sat down with a few of them.
The Next Wave Committee is a group of 12 high school students who program films and events. And then during the festival, we tag 10 films that we think a youth audience would really love.
I think what we're looking for are films that speak on experiences that not only we can relate to, but stories that are universal in their appeal to youth. And not even just youth, but also really anybody that can sort of connect to sort of these youthful and very passionate, spirited films.
Also diversity. We want stories from like different genders and different countries and different people, and I think that's really important because then people are going to understand each other even if they can't relate to it. You learn from it, and that's what we're trying to do.
At this current moment, marginalized voices like women and people of color and trans people, they're all looking for a story that represents them, and I think it's very easy to dismiss representation when you've been constantly represented by film and by art in general.
I start chemo in a few weeks, and so I'm posting this to somewhat awkwardly ask for financial support.
I'm Calvin Thomas.
And I'm Yona Lewis.
And we wrote and directed White Lie. The idea that a group of 12 high school students watched our film, found something in it, connected to it, related to it, and wanted to share it with other people their age is very exciting for us.
This has been really tough, but I am so ready to fight back.
White Lie is about a young woman who's faking cancer to defraud people. That's really what it's about.
And why is this a subject that you guys wanted to dive into?
We came to the idea of doing a character who chooses to fake cancer by just hearing real life cases. It was something that was shocking. I don't think we could have come up with the idea on our own, because I don't think people would have believed it.
Why do you think it connected with people who are 15 to 18?
The film is about a young person. She's in university, and the film obviously deals with social media, technology, all these things, and the way in which that affects our lives and society at large. And so I think it makes sense that they found something that spoke to them, spoke to their lives in this movie.
All of us together just had a really strong reaction to it, where we were all very deeply impacted in some way. That you have this female protagonist who is strong and independent but isn't always likable. As a young woman, it's really nice to see like on screen and have a more public appearance that like you don't always have to be liked and you don't always have to do the right thing. But you can still grow from that.
People just are more comfortable seeing themselves on screen, and then they'll be more comfortable with themselves. That's our big goal, to just help people understand others' perspectives.
The teens also gave us their picks for Best Film at TIFF this year. You can find them on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto.
This is what's left of an historic house on Jarvis Street after a fire ripped through it on Sunday night. I'm Greg Ross. The fire marshal is now investigating not only what caused this fire, but whether or not they can salvage what's left of this structure. We'll have that story coming up.
2 days after a fire ripped through a designated heritage house on Jarvis Street, the Ontario Fire Marshal's office still has not been able to begin their investigation. Our Greg Ross is at Carlton and Jarvis for us tonight. Greg, why haven't they been able to start yet?
Well, Dwight, the main reason is they simply have not been able to get into this house. You can see the damage is so bad that they haven't been able to determine whether or not it's safe to enter at this point. One thing we do know is that this is not the first time that there's been a fire at this house. There was another pretty serious fire back in 2016. Now, at that time, they were able to save the structure here. They may not be so lucky this time around. This was Sunday night as a massive blaze ripped through a house at 314 Jarvis Street. And now, after more than 150 years at this location, this house may be too damaged to save. It's so bad, the Ontario Fire Marshal has still not been able to get in to start an investigation.
We've had collapse of the ceiling. The walls have collapsed into the structure. All that needs to be removed for us to go in.
They also can't do anything until engineers from the city's Heritage Preservation Department arrive.
It is a historical building, so certainly there is an interest there. So if anything can be recovered, then we'll try to assist in that process as far as waiting until that can be done.
Police are also conducting their own separate investigation, and they're not ruling out the possibility of arson.
It is a very sad day for Heritage Toronto.
Camille Bégin from Heritage Toronto says this house is an important piece of the history of the area.
So this is a late 19th century building that had been sort of renovated and refashioned in the early 20th century. To understand the history of this building, we have to imagine that this entire street was lined with houses like this one, because really Jarvis Street was a street of mansions for well-to-do Torontonians in the 19th century.
This was one of the few still standing. Bégin wonders if owners of the property were doing enough to protect it.
It's a building that was left empty and more or less abandoned for many years, close to a decade. So it's not surprising if you leave your house to, basically rot, be left to the elements for a few years. This is what can happen.
The property is owned by a company called Phantom Developments. They're in negotiations with the city to build a 30-story condo. According to City Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, the owners had agreed to maintain most of the existing structure and were in compliance with city bylaws.
As I understand it, the building was secure. The building owners were not in any infraction. They've taken possession as of the beginning of this year, and what they found when they purchased the building was that the building was filled with squatters. And it would not be surprising if unfortunately, the fire was set by those individuals.
At this point, the fire marshal is not confirming whether squatters were involved with this fire. In fact, they're not saying whether they believe that this was an intentional fire or whether or not it was accidental. What they are saying is that tomorrow they're going to be bringing in some heavy machinery here, including a cherry picker. And the plan is to be able to lower themselves over these walls that are still standing so that they can get a better look inside Dwight and determine, number one, if it's safe to leave these walls up or if they have to come down, and number two, they're going to be looking for signs as to whether or not this was an intentional fire.
That could lose a piece of Toronto history there. Thank you, Greg. Authorities in Southern California say the search for victims of a dive boat fire has turned into a recovery. Divers are now focused on retrieving the victims seen inside the sunken vessel, as well as on the ocean floor.
Today, efforts will be made to stabilize the boat so that divers can safely enter it, search it, and recover additional victims.
The dive boat Conception became engulfed in flames early yesterday morning as 34 passengers slept below deck. 5 crew members escaped. It has been confirmed that at least 25 people died. The Coast Guard is trying to determine how the fire started. Walmart has announced it will no longer sell handgun ammunition. The company is also asking customers to not carry firearms in their U.S. stores. Once the company runs out of its current inventory of ammunition, it will make a complete exit from handgun sales. Moving forward, Walmart will only sell hunting rifles and related ammunition. The move comes just days after a mass shooting claimed 7 lives in Odessa, Texas, as well as 2 other back-to-back shootings last month, one of them at a Walmart store.
I've been on a quest
to document the dialects of Ontario for about the last 10 to 12 years.
And it's a quest that has led this professor to try and get the Ontario meaning of words like bush party in the dictionary. We'll bring you that story coming up a little later. Can I out you there, Colette? Did you attend any high school bush parties back in the day?
I was going to say, I might know what
One or
bush
two.
party
Yeah,
might
I think
be.
I know two.
Yeah, there you go. I think soaker is another one that's going to be in there. Boy, that's one that's up my alley. I know that one too. Let's go ahead and talk about the current temperatures, but we may see some soakers coming through as we do have some storms that are going to be rolling through in the overnight hours, already having some impact off to the northwest of us. 22 is the current temperature. Have to start getting used to the fact we're in the beginning of September, and at this time of year, an average high is around 23.4 degrees. So that unofficial high pretty close to seasonal as our temperatures are starting to cool down. The overnight lows, too, they're not down to single digits yet, but they're getting down there. This is a look at what's going on then. The areas in yellow are the severe thunderstorm watch, so that extends about back towards southwestern Ontario. That's areas where severe storms could develop, but I want to take your attention up to the Bruce Peninsula, where you see in red, so severe thunderstorm warning has been in play there from Environment Canada. And you can see some of the stronger storms have actually pushed across, but then there's a little bit of redevelopment here. I'm going to show you another perspective, and that would be to show you what the lightning strikes are like. So taking off the imagery in terms of the clouds and the radar, these are just the lightning strikes, and you can see intense batch that went through with those cells. Still some more kind of coming through, maybe not quite as potent as the one that moved through that area, but that's why we've got that warning that is in place. Essentially, we have a system that's going to be coming through a front. And I mentioned this earlier in the show that what's affecting us is actually going to have a bit of an impact, too, in a positive way on Hurricane Dorian, seeing this trough in the jet stream, and the cold front associated with this system coming through here will start to nudge along so that it's going to be moving a little more quickly. Not fast, but moving a little more quickly, certainly than it was when it was heading over the Bahamas. Your precipitation outlook, these are some of those storms that are going to kind of push on towards the east, and as they come through in the overnight hours, quite likely you'll hear a rumble of thunder. You'll get into some areas where we get some heavier downpours, and then that pushes through. Now, out ahead of it, the winds are going to be quite strong from the southwest and get gusty through the overnight hours. Then tomorrow they change towards the west and eventually the northwest, and still a little bit of a cool breeze. So a breezy day ahead for tomorrow, but especially tonight and tomorrow morning. Into tomorrow morning, by the way, a few residual showers could be left behind. Most of this is going to be in the overnight hours tonight, but that potential is there in the morning, so something to take note of. But after that, later on in the day, we get into some sunshine tomorrow, and into Thursday, we should have quite a bit of sunshine, so that's going to be one of our nicer days, but some colder air making its way in. Those winds that I mentioned, so picking up out ahead of the front from the south to southwest. Look in the overnight hours. If you're somebody who drives at night, high-profile vehicle on the Burlington Skyway, things like that, you know those winds get even more significant. We may see some of these gusts over 60, even 70 kilometers an hour. Then by tomorrow morning, still breezy, not as bad as through midnight, and by tomorrow afternoon, starting to come down to more manageable limits that we'll be seeing. So overnight tonight, looking at temperatures in those upper teens, well above seasonal for those overnight lows. Tomorrow, highs 19 to 21. Will be mostly around 20 degrees throughout the area. And then into Thursday, a nice looking day. And Friday, Saturday, slim chance comes back in, Dwight, that we can start to see some showers at the end of the week and to the first part of the weekend anyway.
We've got stars in town this weekend. We don't have to get too wet on the red carpet,
I know, but you know what? We also don't want it to get too cold. So
that's true.
It's not so bad. We're kind of leveling things off here.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Game, set, and match. Mississauga's very own Bianca Andreescu won her way into the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open, the first Canadian to do so in more than 25 years.
And that'll do it.
Andreescu defeated Taylor Townsend late last night in NYC. This is the 19-year-old's best ever result at a Grand Slam tournament. Just last year, she arrived at the U.S. Open ranked 208th in the world. Now she advances to her first ever quarterfinals to face off against Germany's Elise Mertens tomorrow. Good luck, kid. As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX was down by 42 points. The Dow Jones was also down by 285, and the Canadian dollar traded for an average of almost 75 cents U.S. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Canadians might not realize how many words we use that aren't actually in the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, a Toronto prof hopes to change that after spending a decade studying Canadian slang.
Hi, my name's Sally Teglamonte, and I'm a linguist at the University of Toronto. I've been on a quest to document the dialects of Ontario for about the last 10 to 12 years. How many communities have I been to? I think I've just logged in number 17. Every community that I go to has its own story, has its own words, has its own local expressions. One of the first words I discovered that I had no idea would come up is the word soaker. What's a soaker? It's what happens when you step in a puddle and your foot gets wet. And a very important word in Ontario, at least in some parts, is the May run. And that's the May 24th weekend, where you go on a run of drinking, carousing, jumping in the lake, etc. And another one is slimes. It sounds awful, but what is it? It's what's left of an Ontario lake after a mine has dumped all the muck from the mine into the lake. Another word is bush party. That's where you have a party down a dirt road as far away from parents as you can get, open the trunk, pull out the beer, sit down in and have a party. But how many Canadian words are there in the Oxford English Dictionary? There are precisely 260 Canadian words. So where is Canadian English in the Oxford English Dictionary? And so it occurred to me that maybe what I could do is talk to the chief editor and say, hey, how about we get together and put some more Canadian words into the Oxford English Dictionary?
I was the kid at the back of the class. It was hard to focus because I had struggles and I was just trying to pass.
A message for teachers from Mississauga's former poet laureate will bring you why he thought it was important to share these words after the break.
September to December, January to June. I used to count down the hours hoping that
Students and parents returning to one Toronto school got a bit of a surprise when they saw their playground this morning.
Pretty much nothing has been done here, and you could just looking back, you'll see overgrown weeds, like really sharp plants that just nothing's been taken care of.
After school, most of my children, they play on this ground, but now it's not safe for them to play.
This was what greeted kids at Joyce Public School near Lawrence in Caledonia. The playground completely taken over by weeds during the summer break. The TDSB saying in a statement tonight the playground cleanup couldn't be done in time for the first day of school. What happened to all summer? Anyway, but they say staff will get rid of the mess first thing tomorrow morning.
September to December, January to June. I used to count down the hours hoping that it would end soon. But I was lucky because I had teachers that cared. Ones that asked me what was wrong and listened to what I shared. It was you that showed up.
GTA poet Wally Shaw shared a back-to-school poem on Twitter, thanking teachers and advocating against education funding cuts. I spoke with him about why he felt it was important to put out that poem today.
I was the kid at the back of the class. It was hard to focus because I had struggles and I was just trying to pass.
Let's start with what your experience was like in school.
Well, Dwight, I was really lucky because I had a lot of great teachers that really cared about me. And it was that time before school, after school, on a teacher's lunch hour prep period where I really needed something. I had a lot of teachers that made the time to talk to me through it. And when funding and resources ran thin, after school custodians would let me hoop in the gym.
Were there specific teachers you remember from your school days that really made a difference for you?
There's a couple. I remember Miss Evans, Miss McIntosh, Miss Riley, a lot of great people that they just cared about their students and they were in it because they wanted to make a difference, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I got to shout out Mr. Hilker, Miss Downing, Mr. Dupree. I had those same kind of teachers, great teachers.
It was you that showed up early, and sometimes you stayed late, coaching ball or helping kids with endless things on your own plate.
You said one of them actually, they helped save your life. What did you mean by that?
I had a lot of issues going on in high school. I was dealing with parents fighting, I was dealing with mental health issues, and as a young kid, sometimes you don't know where to go. Sometimes you just don't have a way to release or express or share what you're going through. And for me, it was Miss McIntosh who really sat me down and said, if you ever need anything, I'm here. And she opened her doors for me. And it was one of those times where I just thought, wow, I really am appreciated and supported. And me and her are still friends to this day. And every time I do a show, I bring her and she's front and center. So it's, building that kind of relationship with a student that goes a long way. And that's what I mean by saying a teacher really saved my life. Cuts are like speed bumps when you know there's potential within, because it's harder to reach the back of the class that you're in.
You also mentioned education cuts in the poem. Why did you bring up that issue? Why is that important?
So, I'm certainly not a politician, but I think that quality education is very, very important. If it wasn't for teachers like Miss McIntosh who were able to take time and reach me, I wouldn't be having this interview with you right now. And I think that a lot of other kids that are in positions like mine where they're dealing with struggles at home or mental health issues, that one teacher, that one interaction could potentially be what saves their life.
Have you heard from any of your former teachers after this poem came out and they said, yeah, you're talking about me? Is that about me?
I had a whole bunch send me messages. I had teachers all over Ontario flood my my inbox with messages of thanks and support. And that's what being an artist is about. We create because we want to make a difference, and teachers teach because they want to make a difference, and politicians serve because they want to make a difference. And that's why I'm here, to make that difference.
Whenever I do my educational talks and my motivational talks, I always say teachers equipped us with the tools we need to be successful in life. So great poem, and it's perfect as we start a new school year in the province. Thank you, buddy. Congrats.
Thank you.
Although it isn't the first day in our newsroom, students going back to class had CBC Toronto reminiscing about our first days. And as we head to break, here's some more pictures of some familiar faces during their school years. We've been showing all the school days photos today. Where's yours?
Never mind that. We're
What happened?
saving the best for last.
Okay.
It's you, Dwight.
No way.
Yes, everybody's been waiting to see.
Oh my goodness. I gotta thank my sister Sandy for sending this, or maybe not thank her. All right, look at that
okay,
kid.
Tell us, what grade would that be?
I think that's about grade 4 or 5. Mr. Dupree's class at Fairgrove Public School.
What a handsome
I was
young
doing the
man.
announcements back then. That's where I started my broadcasting career because I was in the office so much. They're like, Dwight, you're here every day anyway. You might as well read the announcements. So that's how it all started. Yes.
There you
okay,
go.
can we get that off the screen now and talk about the quick forecast as
the
we run out
weather?
of time? Yes.
I love that, by the way. Yeah, we do have some showers, thunderstorms rolling through with that front that's coming through the overnight hours. So most of it will be in the overnight, but there could be a few residual showers into early tomorrow morning. 18 for our overnight low. Breezy conditions into tomorrow. 20 for the high.
I'm blushing. That's
So
it for us tonight.
photogenic.
Have a great night, everybody.